On this episode of Super Tips, we're going to do a recap of the 2021 CUES Supervisory Committee Seminar. Stay tuned. Greetings everyone and welcome to Super Tips, the only show dedicated to the education and training of supervisory committee members. My name is Anson Cooley and I'm the owner and principal of Synergy Credit Union Consulting. Before we get started, please take a moment and like this video and also consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, CreditUnion.Education. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we also have created the only supervisory committee course that is completely self-paced and online. You can learn more about the course at supervisorycommittee.training. Also, we recently launched our brand new website, Supervisory.Education. This is the only place online where your supervisory committee members can receive complimentary tools and training videos to further their education. Let's get started with the episode. This year's CUES Supervisory Committee Seminar was located in Amelia Islands, Florida. The event was well attended. We had 122 supervisory committee members there, and over half of them had never attended a CUES event or even any supervisory committee training previously. Based on some of the questions and some of the statements made during the seminar, there's still some confusion in the credit union world about the supervisory committee function, internal audit independence, how many hats your internal auditor should wear, questions about the supervisory committee charter, and other aspects of governance that should be pretty simple for some of the size credit unions that were in the room. So let's get started. Number one, internal audit wearing too many hats. Honestly, I don't even know how this is even a thing in 2021. If you are an internal auditor, you cannot also be the compliance officer in charge of vendor management, in charge of BSA, risk management, and also be internal audit. There were two individuals in the seminar who were responsible for all of these things, and they were at billion-dollar plus institutions. How is that possible when you have a regulator that comes in every 18 months and you have an accounting firm that's supposed to be looking at all of these things? It's bewildering to me to even know that this is still a thing. Imagine for that institution how much, frankly, just how much money they save by being able to consolidate all of those different functions into one FTE. And you know what's so interesting about it is that the internal auditors in these situations, they know that they shouldn't be in charge of all those things, but they're stuck because they can't say anything because they literally report to the CEO. You know, and so all I could really do is really uplift them and just tell them, frankly, how amazing they are, honestly, to be able to manage all those things. But I asked them, you can't juggle all of that and do all of that well. And you get that begrudgingly, yeah, I know. And for those that are listening in management, it completely undermines, in my opinion, everything that you say that you are and everything that you do, frankly, when you don't allow for the independent functions within your organization to operate in a normal fashion. It just undermines everything. Number two, stop punching down. In professional boxing, there's this concept called punching down. It happens when a person that is in a higher weight class or weighs more fights somebody in a lower weight class. Well, when that happens, the person who weighs more punches hurt more, and the person who's smaller, their punches hurt the larger person less. In the same way, in a lot of our financial institutions, all of the C-suite is made up of the chief lending officer, the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer. But the internal audit function is typically a middle manager or some VP that cannot spar or step into the ring at the same weight as the individuals they've been tasked to audit. Now, this conversation right here is triggering and a contentious discussion with even some of my favorite CEOs. Because for some individuals, the thought of having an internal auditor in the building that they're paying that is of the same weight class of all the rest of the senior managers is terrifying for some people. They think it will be disruptive and cause this weird environment where everybody's contentious. They couldn't be any more wrong. If you're a financial institution that wants to go far by putting a big engine, loan production, and all these fancy things into the infrastructure of your institution, you have to make sure that the brake function is commensurate with the engine that you're putting in the car. Let me just say this. If you're thinking that the individual that's currently your internal audit manager isn't or doesn't have the stature or have the knowledge and experience to be a chief audit officer, then I can hold space for you in that way. But you still, especially if you're over $500 million in assets, you can still say, okay, we need to fill this spot at some point, and we'll look for an individual to fill it, even if this person has to grow into that role. But just because your current internal auditor does not have the knowledge, skill, and ability to fill that role doesn't mean that there isn't a gap in your org chart. And last point on this, it's not management's decision. And the only way it becomes management's decision is because management has developed a rapport with the board to the point where they have willingly abdicated their governance role and things that they should be making decisions about to the management team. And that happens a lot. And this is what's so frustrating about the volunteer nature of the credit unions. A lot of the individuals are just good people that trust management to make good decisions for them. And they're teachers, they're firefighters, they're lay people with respect to financial institutions. So they're looking for you as a CEO or as a manager, and they're trusting you to make better decisions about the independence and infrastructure of your organization than what's happening. And lastly, supervisory committees need charters. There is 3 credit unions that have been to this seminar that I've conducted the last three years. And in the first year, I gave them an example supervisory committee charter to go back and try to have ratified or board approved. Here it is, the 3rd year, and these same supervisory committee members have not been able to get the supervisory committee charter approved by the board. Why isn't it happening? Well, it's really not the board members. Again, we're talking about volunteers. What's happening is that the management team does not like the formalization of the powers and authority of the supervisory committee over the internal audit and external audit functions. So what they do is they find a couple of board members and communicate to them and convince them that if they were to approve this supervisory committee charter, it would somehow undermine their authority as a board member. Well, you know, some board members not going to have that. So no, you supervisory committee, y'all going to stay in y'all place. We're not going to approve your charter. It's manipulative, and it undermines the cooperative movement because, again, although you may not have, or a manager may not have any nefarious intent at the moment, what about the next management team? What about the next CEO or the next CEO? You're leaving your institution ill-equipped from a governance standpoint to protect itself from the jokers that are bound to come through your org chart at some point for your benefit during the short period of time you're at the institution. Every supervisory committee should have a charter because it establishes its authority. It's not my word against your word. It's, hey, the internal audit function, external audit function is going to be under the authority of the supervisory committee. The supervisory committee needs to have a budget. It needs to be in charge of the evaluation and hiring of both the internal audit and external audit functions. It just outlines the rules of engagement between themselves and the board and themselves as the management team. What's wrong with that?